Welcome to Saturday's Warrior. With Colorado now all set to join the Big 12, everybody's been hypothesizing who is going to be the next school to get the invite and become the 14th member of the Big 12. And so today, we are ranking our top 10 candidates for who the Big 12 should invite next. But before we get into it, please be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel, share the video. It all really helps us and we really appreciate it. So now let's jump to it. At number 10, we have Memphis. Now, if you've been on social media or talked to any Memphis fans, you'd see that they'd have you believing that they are without a doubt a no-brainer, the very best option to be added, that Brett Yormark needs to get on the phone with them right now and invite them to the Big 12. Whereas they also have so many detractors that just absolutely despise them, that don't like them because of old rivalries or because the city's crime rate or is impoverished. And we think that it's kind of somewhere in the middle, which is why we have them at 10 on this list. Obviously, they're a great basketball program, which really fits with Yormark's vision of the conference. And their football is also improving as well. They continue to make and have plans to make improvements to the Liberty Bowl. And geographically, they fit because they are pretty close to the traditional Big 12 members while helping bridge the gap with the eastern flank of the conference. And what I saw is that most of the haters, it feels like, tend to be from other former AAC schools that are now in the Big 12. So to me, that speaks to the potential rivalries that they could bring with it and reignite in the Big 12, which I think would be a good thing. So there's a lot of case to be made. I think if it ends up being Memphis ends up joining the Big 12, I think that there is a lot of value there, but they're just not that high on my list yet. At number 9, we have UConn. And while it remains to be one of the most likely candidates to actually receive an invite from the Big 12, for us, they're a little bit lower on our list. And it's not because their football's been terrible, because they have had success in the past. They won the Big East and went to BCS Bowls. They had a good year last year. And no, that's not a trend, but it is a good sign. So if Yormark sees enough from the program that shows that they are willing to invest in football and do what it takes to be competitive there, then I think that's enough. My concern is more with that the fan base seems to be really divided on this. And so I wonder, is there going to be the fan support and engagement with that football team to give it what it needs to really be competitive and help drive value for the conference? Because obviously they're a great fit in many ways. They've elevated themselves to blue blood status in basketball, and obviously that's a big part of the Big 12's identity and where Brett Yormark wants to take the conference. And they are near the New York market. They might have a small piece of it, but even a small piece of that humongous market is still significant. So they're a great fit in a lot of ways. I don't love that they expand our conference even further apart from the existing members, but they potentially could bring a lot of value. But I still think that there's some uncertainty there, which is why we have them at 9. At number 8, we have San Diego State. Now, what's the next best thing to adding one of the Pac-12 schools? It's adding one of their top expansion candidates. Not only does it further hinder the Pac-12, but it also brings basically everything the Big 12 is looking for. It gets you into the Pacific time zone. It brings an excellent basketball program, very solid football, new stadium, and it even reunites a rivalry with BYU. And for me, adding another Western school instead of Eastern, which is even better. The downside is, as we all know, is that to join the conference next year, they would have to pay that really large exit fee. So it's likely that they wouldn't be able to join until 2025. At number 7, we have Boise State. Now, I know all the knocks against them. They're in a small market. Their academics are weak. But out of the group of 5, they still have one of, if not the biggest brand. And I think at this point, that's what it's about, is creating intriguing matchups. And I think Boise has shown that they've been able to sustain a level of competitiveness in football, and they're growing their basketball program, that imagine what they could do once they get Big 12 revenue. And I think that they always drive interest and that they could really you have to look at that brand upside and the value that they could bring to the conference. Not to mention that they're also out west, another team to fill one of those late time slots. Again, a really strong rivalry with BYU, which I think brings a lot of intrigue. So I think there's so many pros there that outweigh the cons, but people have really closed their mind. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that people were talking about Boise State and Memphis being two of the next schools most likely to get in expansion. And now it feels like those two programs have mostly been pushed by the wayside. So I really think Boise brings a lot of value. At number 6, we have Oregon State and Washington State. Now, I look at these two programs pretty similarly. They bring a lot of the same value, but they also have a lot of the same negatives when you look at it. And now, it was the Gambling Gauchos. They were actually talking about UConn, but I think this applies for me to these two schools as well as all the group of fives. But I'm good if they join, but I'm not really good if it's the only team to join. So if we're going to 14, you know, I wouldn't be as excited if the conference continues to grow to 15, 16. I think they would be a great add. I still think there's a lot of value. The real reason why I slated them ahead of the group of five programs is really just because they're coming from a Power Five conference. And honestly, because it continues to do more damage to the Pac 12, continuing to put the Big 12 in better standing. Again, I don't want to see necessarily the Pac 12 go away. I'm not for the demise of the Pac 12, but I am for the Big 12 putting itself in the best position going forward. At number 5, we have Utah. I know, but hear me out. The Holy War in the Big 12 would be amazing. Having that rivalry reunited in conference, and Utah is a great program. It's very solid, so it would bring value. Yes, there's a little bit of redundancy in market, but I think their brand is growing, and I think having that rivalry would be great. But I am just amazed and astounded at how Utah has turned an entire conference's fan base against them. So I can't see anybody really wanting Utah in the conference because they've soured so many people on them. However, every conference needs a villain. So again, if everyone's hate watching Utah, maybe that helps drive ratings and again, more value. So I wouldn't write off Utah just yet. At number 4, we have Arizona State. Now, if you're not going to expand all the way into Southern California, this sort of feels like the next best thing with its proximity to it. And not to mention, it is in a huge market with a very large student body and alumni base, which was essentially the strategy with adding UCF, right? And they have potential to be competitive and have success in both football and basketball. And when I talk to my buddies, I know this is anecdotal, and I ask them about the schools in Arizona, they say that ASU is way bigger than UA in terms of fan base. So I think that there's a lot of good qualities, but they are very resistant to the Big 12, it seems. At number 3, we have Arizona. Now, admittedly, this is the most likely candidate to be added to the Big 12 next, and we're totally okay with that. I think they have a solid brand, open up a large new market for the conference, bring blue blood or at least close to blue blood status in basketball, and bring what I think is potential to be at least competitive in football. So we'd be very happy if they do end up joining the Big 12 next. So this ranking has more to do about the teams ahead of them. At number 2, we have Washington. And while they're not the best cultural fit for the Big 12, they bring a huge brand, even bigger than I realized. Recently, we did a collaboration video with Wild Ute where we took football revenue to develop valuations of each of the Power 5 programs, some of the G5 programs, and ranked them. And Washington was up there in the top category with the blue blood programs. And so they really are a valuable brand that brings a lot of upside for the conference. But we all know that they've got a wandering eye for the Big 12. And unlike the school ranked ahead of Washington, we think they've got much better odds of actually getting that invite and going to the Big 10. So do we want to bring in this big And there's still that chance that maybe that invite from the Big Ten never comes and Oregon stays. You do risk messing up the mojo in the conference